So the question comes up, when did we invent clothes and who did? And I can, judging by the record, I can say that only humans were the only ones who ever wore clothes. Woolly mammoths didn't wear clothes. Gorillas never wear clothes. They were in Africa, And so the question is, what objective evidence do we have of clothes, right?
And there's never any clothes found.
No clothes found. But we find other things that indicate whether there could have been clothes. One of them is the needle. You need needles to sew hides together. So when they find the needle, they say, look, why would they invent the needle, right?
Yeah.
And the first needle that we have today, right, you see it here in Delson 2000, Encyclopedia of Human Evolution and Prehistory.
You mean the oldest needle found?
Yeah, and they say bone and antler needles first appear in the Solutrean period, 22,000 to 17,000 years ago of the Upper Paleolithic, and suggest the sewing of hides with a thread made of sinew and vegetable material. So that's the first needle we found, or the ones that we know about. Okay.
The oldest needle, but isn't it?
Yeah,
hard
so
to
let's say
find needles.
I'm sorry.
Finding needles is kind of
It's finding a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah, I find ancient needles.
But at least again, we're talking about objective data,
Yeah.
and we don't see the same thing for Neanderthal. You don't find a Neanderthal needle. Like they could have taken a bone from some kind of animal, even if it was a crude needle. And they could have sewn some kind of string and tied their hides together. We have no evidence of string or of needles. Okay.
They didn't even have those fine motor skills, did they? Or
Probably
it's assumed
not.
that they did,
Maybe they did. Maybe they did, but they didn't need it for what they did. These hominids. All they had is these axes and
they were
hammers,
these big tools.
big tools, coarse ones, big stones, and they just killed the animal. They didn't need to have sophisticated things like, I'm going to sew today.
Well, what tools did they find of the Neanderthals?
Well, again, all these
that they attributed to.
They find these big hatchets, these clubs, these spears. These
so
are
it's
the
all
tools.
woodworking and hunting.
And stone, yeah, wood and stone. But again, sometimes they say that things like string, which could be made out of plants that wouldn't survive over time. So
same thing with needles, but
maybe, yeah. So this is what they say. Now they did find there's a claim. It's in the Siberian Times, a Russian magazine. It says, world's oldest needle found in Siberian cave that stitches together human history. 2016.
Nice pun.
Yeah, but the issue is that these people made this claim, as always. Everybody likes to make outrageous claims without any real objective evidence. And they said they found it in this cave out there in Siberia. But then we have a statement by Reich, his group, right, 2010. It says, this is interesting, he says, we dated 7 bone fragments found close to the hominin remains in layer 11 in the east and south galleries of the same cave, right? 4 of the 7 dates are infinite dates older than 50,000 years before the present, whereas 3 are finite dates between 16,000 and 30,000 years before the present. What does this mean? This layer 11, was contaminated by 2 different time frames.
The hotel.
One was it's like a hotel. Different people lived over thousands of years in this cave, and in layer 11 where they excavated, well, here we find bones from 50,000 years ago or artifacts or whatever, and here we find at the same layer we find things from 16,000 years ago. So we don't know if this needle that these people claim they found dates to 50,000 years ago or 16,000 years ago. It could have been made by, Neolithic people for all we know.
Yeah.
Which is less than 10,000 years ago. So these are outrageous claims that these people made. Another source for clothes is lice. They came up with a theory that says that we lost our body lice.
Source for clothes.
That
source for clothes?
Because supposedly we lost our body hair, and the theory of why we lost our body hair is that there was like a tendency to get rid of lice. So this is the theory. In retrospect, they say that we lost our body hair so the lice in our body would not have a place to hide. Okay? So there's like a pull from the future. Yeah.
Why aren't we all bald?
Yeah, well, again, gorillas and chimps, they have lice. You see them grooming each other, so, and they live in the equator, close to the equator. So they didn't lose their hair because it was too hot. They didn't lose their hair because of lice. But the theory is that we lost our body hair so that the lice wouldn't have a place to hide, right? So we had body lice. Over time, we lost our hair, and now that we finally got rid of the lice.
They mean the ones in Africa?
The ones in Africa. These are humans in Africa, right? But then there's several problems with that theory, and again, they say they give a time frame here from maybe 75,000 to 175,000 years ago. That's when body lice evolved from hair lice. So we used to have hair lice, and approximately, maybe they do this through genetic analysis, regression analysis, they say, from our calculations, body lice began to exist. They evolved from head lice approximately, or at most, 175,000 years.
That's kind of hard to make sense of, because why would the body lice emerge when we start losing our body hair? Or when we start having the tendencies to lose our body hair?
Yeah, again,
something seems crisscross there.
Again, and I have a lot of questions about that theory from different angles. One is that here we lose our body, lose our hair, and the body lice are now gone because now we finally got rid of that pest. Then we go out there, hunt an animal, take its hide out, and put it on top of us, and we bring the lice back on us. So it's like we defeat the purpose. So I'm not sure that body lice has anything to do with why we lost hair. I think we just lost hair and that's it.
Why are we talking about hair loss?
Because we're assuming that humans were completely bald, except like you say in the head, and we migrate now to Europe, and now we notice that it's cold, but we don't have the adaptation to to snow and to cold weathers, and so now we start putting clothes on.
We also don't have that fat under our skin, as
right,
much fat.
Right, and so we have to sew, stitch hides together with needles, and say,
now we have a need.
Now we have a need for clothes because we don't have that natural resistance that Neanderthal had. Right?
So why we lost our hair is still in the air. We still don't know that for sure, but we could extrapolate that we made clothes because we didn't have hair when we went to the north.
Right. And then there's a third one. So we have, the needle, we have the lice. Now another is the scrapers. They found scrapers for the old days, including for Neanderthals, where they say these scrapers were used to pull the hide from the meat.
Oh, okay.
And so they say, see here we have evidence that, they pulled the skin off and they put it on.
Oh, I thought it's because they didn't want hairy meat.
And I think that's the reason they made these scrapers. Yeah. It's to pull, so they didn't want to eat, this hide, so they pulled it off and they used them, they ate the meat. Yeah. That's one. And the other ones, they could have made tents for all we know, or maybe, carpets. We don't know what they use the hides for.
Or they just threw them away.
Or maybe they threw them away. Maybe they stank so much. Brought all the fleas or flies. They said, "No, get rid of that, honey. I don't want that stinking thing near me. It smells too much. There's all these flies. Forget it." So
So there's no telling what the shavers were used for.
Yeah, we don't know.
Why
These are theories. These are theories. They're interesting theories, but we should not put our hand in the fire for them. We can't say, "Oh, scrapers are proof that they built clothes." Lice are proof that we lost our hair and later on we needed clothes to fill the hole that we left behind. And needles, they're evidence that we used them for something. Obviously, if you have needles and especially if you have some kind of string out there, it was almost certainly used for sewing. But we don't have that evidence for Neanderthals. So we don't have any evidence whatsoever that Neanderthals used clothes. What we do have is a reasoning process where we say, well, how did Homo erectus survive there, in the old days?
They're in the cold.
Yeah, and
the cold, that's where they grew up. So they almost from birth they had to have that resistance to cold. They must have had that extra thick fat under their skin and extra hair. Neanderthals, I mean.
And even before then. Homo erectus had to live in the Arctic already, and there you see how interesting it is. They always dress Neanderthals with clothes, but they never dress Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis with clothes. They only dress Neanderthals with clothes because of the mating. They never suggest even that we slept with Heidelbergs.
So the Erectus in Europe was hairy, the Heidelberg was hairy, and then we have this Neanderthal who's hairy, but all of a sudden he needs clothes.
Yeah, and so the question, did Neanderthals have clothes? In fact, all these movie directors from documentaries, they always dress the Neanderthals up in clothes. I mean, why don't they dress the woolly mammoth in snowshoes while they're at it, or whatever? It doesn't make any sense. There is no justification to dress Neanderthals with clothes. They did not have clothes. This is a gorilla, an Arctic gorilla. Now, there's another issue, and that's, they raised the issue that the reason Neanderthals had clothes is they could survive the cold. That's essentially what people have in their minds. They say, well, no, how could Neanderthal live in such low temperatures?
I can't walk on snow barefoot.
But wolves can. Wolves sleep in the snow. So do polar bears. Now take a polar bear, take him to the equator, see if he survives. So the same thing with Neanderthal. Neanderthal has this thick layer of fat, and probably very hairy gorilla. And he's used to the cold. He's not going to put anything on because he doesn't need it, first of all. There's no justification for him to evolve clothes. And then I cannot imagine Neanderthal going farther south, like to the equator, and saying, oh, this is sunny, this is warmer weather, thank God. No, he was an Arctic animal. That's what he was. He lived there and he died there. He never came out of there. So again, wolves, they don't need clothes. Woolly mammoths don't need clothes. Woolly rhinos that used to live in those days, possibly the woolly hippo. There was a hippo.
Woolly hippo?
Yeah, there was a hippo in Europe also, a normal hippo, but he was like a northern hippo. He died out also, I think, like 25,000 years ago. And this hippo probably was woolly too. We don't know because, we don't have skin from this animal. But my point here is that I think that Neanderthal was the woolly man.
Woolly man.
He was the woolly man.
He was the Yeti. Did Neanderthals live in all of Europe? Like all the way down to southern Europe?
They lived all the way to Italy, southern part of Italy and Greece and Yugoslavia. But keep in mind that the glaciers were all the way to the Alps. So it was cold weather all the way down to the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean wasn't frozen. They
No, it wasn't.
walk down to the...
No, it wasn't frozen. It wasn't. The Mediterranean wasn't frozen, but for Homo erectus to make it to England, the channel that today is the strip of water was frozen. They could cross into England, on foot.
I'm saying it's another reason. So
it was cold.
It's another reason explaining how or why the Neanderthals didn't go to the south, because they had the Mediterranean in the way.
Well, they could have gone through Turkey.
Yeah, it would have to be this roundabout.
And again,
way.
they would have to cross the what is it, the Dardanelles there, the little strip of water that's between Turkey and the mainland, European mainland. So I'm not sure they even took the trouble. Why go there? Not only that, but they had probably enough game in their own region. They had no reason to go to Israel or to the Middle East. So the question is whether the Middle Eastern so-called Neanderthals were really Neanderthals or some kind of archaic human. And there are these two opinions today. For sure, the ones in the Middle East did not match the Neanderthals in Western Europe. They're noticeably different. They're measurably different. Okay. You can see
assuming they're Neanderthals at all.
Assuming they're, but I mean, that's the point. If they are Neanderthals, they're different. But more than likely, they're just archaic humans. So. Ooga. So, what does it take to put some sense into the minds of those people who think that their great-grandmothers descend from the Neanderthals? Well, let me tell you what I think. Cowabunga!